So the first reading from Sirach reminds us, praise no one before they speak. You can tell who they are from when they speak. And it's true. As soon as a person opens his or her mouth, you can tell a lot. You can tell where they're from, even within a country. You can tell their level of education, probably. You can tell their mental state, their psychological state, their momentary state, perhaps. I guess the most famous, artistic representation of this is, Pygmalion, My Fair Lady, trying to change someone's accent to fit into a different level of society. But that's not the main level we should be concerned about, is it? It's, what does it tell us morally and spiritually about a person when they start speaking? Jesus says in the gospel, a good person will produce good and evil will produce evil, because out of the abundance of whatever's in your heart, your mouth will speak. And that's very serious. Because we need to look at what we are speaking. When the gospel reminds us that we don't see the beam, the wooden beam in our own eye, but rather the splinter in our brother's eye, that's a good measure. A lot of what we speak, especially if it comes out judgmental, angry, if it's scornful of others, if it's full of rancor and arrogance, well, that shows what's in our own heart. And it shows, well, the beam in our own eye. One of the most elementary psychological truths, that I learned decades ago, which is so very true, is that what we most dislike in another person is probably what we dislike in ourselves. So whatever we accuse another person of is likely what's hidden in our own heart, which we may more or less be aware of. It's projection. What they call projection. You project your own stuff onto other people. And, the judgment goes out that way. It's also scapegoating is the same mechanism, which René Girard says is the main driver of civilization. Get an enemy, find an enemy out there. It's all, never in here. It's out there. You project all that evil in yourself out onto another person. And looking at the political discourse today and the social media, I'm flabbergasted at the naivete. I mean, it's so obvious, so often, that people are just projecting what's in themselves out onto other people. If a dictator calls another person a dictator, it means they're a dictator, probably. There are thousands of examples on both sides of the spectrum. But we're just so clueless about what's going on in our own hearts and minds. Out of the abundance of our heart, the mouth speaks. But as we've seen the last 2 Sundays in the Gospel, the Sermon on the Plain, the Sermon on the Mount, we should be filled with compassion, love, understanding, mutual welcome, pardon, the search for justice, the search for welcome, so that all are welcome and all have their dignity as children of God upheld and furthered and recognized and promoted. Whatever the political cost or the social cost or whatever, or the financial cost, do we embrace one another as brothers and sisters? Or does what we start speaking, dismissive of others, other races or other religions or other nations or other sexual orientations? What does it say about ourselves? We're not recognizing the beam in our own eye. So we need to do that. The second reading speaks about, the abundance of good works that we should have. If we want the mortal to be swallowed up in immortality and the corruptible by the incorruptible, in our resurrection, we need to be sure that we're abounding in those good works, full of love and joy and peace, welcome, kindness and goodness and meekness and self-control. That's the abundance from which we should speak and from which we should live. In a couple of weeks during the Lenten liturgies, we'll be seeing the John chapter 9, the cure of the man born blind. And my favorite line from that whole long chapter, is at the very end. This whole theme is about blindness, which is what the gospel is about today as well. Can the blind lead the blind, which is what's happening all around us, maybe in our own families, who knows. But my favorite line is the Pharisees at the very end say, "So are we blind? Are we blind too?" And Jesus says, remarkably, if you were blind, you'd have no fault. What he means by that is, we all start out blind, in case you haven't noticed. We all start out blind, and we need to have our blindness cured. And I hope all of you have had that experience in your life where, I was blind, but now I see, as the Amazing Grace says. But then he says, Jesus adds, if you were blind, you'd have no fault, but since you say, we see, your blindness remains, your guilt remains. Wow. So in other words, if we go around saying to ourselves or to our colleagues or our family, I have a perfectly clear vision of what the country needs or the church needs or what I need or what the family or whatever, as I see, your guilt remains, because you don't. You don't. No one sees clearly except Jesus. And the more we get close to Jesus, the more clearly we will see the light of the world and the light of our hearts, since he's that. So how about that for Lent? As we approach Lent this week, ask God this Lent to remove the beam in your eye. What do you mean? I don't have a beam. Trust me. Ask the Lord to remove the beam in your eye which you don't even see. By definition, you don't see it. It's in your eye. You don't see it. Or if that's too strong a prayer, at least say, Lord, to the extent that I have still a beam in my eye, please reveal it to me and remove it. What a fantastic prayer that would be. And what a fantastic task that would be for the Lord to accomplish this Lent. Lord, probably I have a beam in my eye that I don't even see in all sorts of ways. Please remove it. That's a very humble prayer and a very courageous prayer, because a lot of people don't want to see. I'm content with my prejudices and my media presence. I love it. Well, does God? So that's a really good prayer if we're up for it.